Welcome to The Explainer. We're diving into a really tough story today, the Unnao case. It's a case about power, about intimidation, and a legal battle that has just gripped the entire country. And you know, a recent court decision has thrown this whole thing right back into the spotlight, focusing on the survivor's incredibly long fight for justice.
And that question, wow, that comes directly from the survivor herself. It's really powerful, and honestly, it's at the very heart of what we're talking about today. It just sums up years and years of struggle, of facing down intimidation, and this seemingly endless quest for justice.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the shocking new court order. Then we have to go back and trace the survivor's long and, frankly, terrifying ordeal. We'll get into the Supreme Court's rare intervention, the conviction that followed, and finally, what's happening right now in the aftermath.
All right, let's start with what's happening right now. We're talking about the High Court's order, the one that suspended a life sentence and put this whole case right back on the front page.
So, the main person in all of this is Kuldeep Singar. Now, he's a very powerful former MLA, and back in 2019, he was convicted for the 2017 rape of a minor. He got a life sentence, but, and this is the big but, just recently, the Delhi High Court put that sentence on pause. They suspended it and gave him bail while his appeal is being heard.
So why is this bail order causing such an uproar? Well, to really get it, you have to understand the terrifying ordeal the survivor and her family went through. This was never just about one crime, it was a whole campaign of intimidation.
I mean, look at this timeline. The path to justice wasn't just difficult, it was actively blocked by this horrifying series of events. After the rape, the survivor was so desperate, she tried to set herself on fire to protest the police doing nothing. The very next day, her father died in police custody after being beaten. And then in 2019, a truck, with its license plate blacked out, smashes into her car. It killed her two aunts and left both her and her lawyer fighting for their lives. I mean, you look at all this together and it's just a chilling pattern.
Okay, so that truck collision in 2019, that was the moment everything changed. It was a huge turning point. So many people believed it wasn't an accident, that it was a deliberate attempt to silence her for good. And the whole incident was just so alarming, so blatant, that it forced India's highest court, the Supreme Court, to step in.
So you had a letter from the survivor's family, you had massive public outrage, and the Supreme Court responded. They basically took direct control of the situation. They looked at everything that had happened and said, okay, this is not a normal case. They recognized that extraordinary measures were absolutely necessary to protect the survivor and to even have a chance at a fair trial.
And they didn't just dip their toes in, they took decisive, sweeping action. First, they moved all 5 related cases completely out of Uttar Pradesh, which is crucial because that's where Singar had all his power. They moved them to a court in Delhi. They also ordered a fast-track trial to be heard day to day. They awarded compensation and, really importantly, ordered federal police protection for the survivor and her family. These were huge steps, all designed to shield this case from local influence.
And all of that intervention, it worked. It led directly to a conviction, which of course makes what just happened, that reversal, all the more dramatic.
So after the Supreme Court stepped in, a Delhi trial court came back with a really decisive verdict in 2019. Singar was found guilty, plain and simple. He was sentenced to prison for the remainder of his natural life. And for so many, that felt like it. A final, hard-won victory. But then, 6 years later, that exact sentence gets suspended.
Now, this is the really critical part. The High Court's decision wasn't about whether Singar was innocent or guilty. It all came down to a legal technicality. See, the original trial court convicted him of aggravated sexual assault. Why? Because as an MLA, he was considered a public servant, which means a harsher sentence. But the High Court looked at the specific law, the POCSO Act, and said actually under this law's definition, an MLA doesn't count as a public servant. And just like that, that one technicality was enough to invalidate the stricter sentence.
So, as part of his conditional bail, Singar had to put up a personal bond of 15 lakh rupees.
And the court did try to put some restrictions on him. You know, the usual conditions. Stay away from the survivor's home, check in with the police every week, hand over his passport. But, and this is the big question, given the unbelievable history of intimidation in this case, the survivor and her family are asking, are these measures really enough to keep them safe? It's a very fair question.
Okay, so that brings us right up to the present moment, the immediate aftermath of this High Court order.
And the reaction was immediate and it was loud. The survivor spoke out right away, talking about her fear and just how unhappy she was with this decision. Protesters showed up outside the High Court,
And here's a really big deal. The CBI, that's the Central Bureau of Investigation, the very agency that prosecuted the case in the first place, they've announced they're going to challenge this bail order. They're taking the fight right back to the Supreme Court.
You know, this whole case is just such a stark reminder that a conviction isn't always the end of the story. Not when there's so much power and influence involved. And it really leaves us with this big, lingering question. When a legal system delivers a verdict, but the fight for justice just keeps going,